Shadows stretched across the canyon as the sun dipped towards the horizon, casting a golden glow over the rugged terrain. Dusk kicked up in the distance, and the rumble of hooves echoed through the valley, carrying with it the promise of people and purpose. But that promise quickly spiraled into chaos as the stagecoach barreled down the narrow path, wheels screeching in a desperate attempt to hold onto balance. Then, in an instant, it happened. A crack like thunder resonated through the canyon as one wheel caught on a rock just slightly too big. The stagecoach lurched violently, tipping over itself like a giant puppet, strings cut and chaos unleashed. Horses whinnied in panic, their powerful bodies flailing as they fought against the reins. The weight of the coach bore down with heart-stopping force, smashing into the rocky earth below. Silence followed, an eerie stillness that lingered like a dark cloud after a storm. But it was a silence laced with the cries of the wounded and the murmurs of the terrified. As the dust settled, Tom Hargrove, a rugged trail guide, approached cautiously. His heart raced, and he swiped the sweat from his brow, his stomach churning at the sight before him. The coach lay crumpled against the rocky cliffside, splintered wood and torn leather scattered like remnants of a forgotten dream. The horses lay exhausted, some injured, others whinnying in confusion. But what caught his breath in his throat was not the wreckage but the faint sound of a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, barely audible beneath the moans of the injured. "Help!" He squinted against the fading light, searching through the twisted metal and splintered wood, and then he saw her. A figure half buried beneath the wreckage, blood trickling down her temple and matting her dark hair. Her vibrant blue dress, once elegant, was now ragged and stained. He rushed forward, panic propelling him, fear gripping his heart. He yelled, though she could barely move, trying to free herself from the weight of the broken stagecoach. He began shoving debris aside, his hands shaking as he uncovered her body. The moment their eyes met, something unexplainable jolted through him. Her deep green eyes held pain but also a flicker of hope. "Thank you," she managed, her voice breaking as she struggled to steady her breathing. Tom's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline but from the reckless bond forming in the chaos. He managed to wriggle her free, lifting her gently into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, though her presence felt heavy in the atmosphere. Focused on her injuries, he glanced away from the wreckage for just a moment. She whispered, her eyes flickering over the chaos. "Alive, I think. I'll get to them, but you need to rest," he replied, now moving quickly, fueled by determination and urgency. Each step felt like an eternity as he carried her further from the wreckage. With the sun hanging low, shadows gathered like whispers of doubt in the canyon. The air became thick with tension, every crack of a branch or rustle of wind raising the hairs on Tom's neck. Strains of panic began to claw at him as he set her down gently on the grass, her body trembling from shock and pain. "Just breathe, okay?" He kept his voice steady, a calming anchor amidst the storm. The weight of their situation was crushing, but even through her pain, she found a way to smile. "I'm Clara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet there was a strength in her tone. "Tom," he replied, kneeling next to her. He ripped a piece of his torn shirt and pressed it gently against her forehead, trying to stem the bleeding. "You're going to be okay, Clara." The two exchanged soft glances, moments stretching out like the vastness of the canyon around them. In that silence between breath and heartbeat, they began to share fragments of their lives. Each story was a small revelation, a thread weaving them closer together. "I was traveling to see my sister," she said, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Tom nodded, the urgency of their situation hitting him harder with each passing second. "I know what it's like to fight for someone you love. I lost my little sister to fever a few years back. I did everything I could to save her." Her eyes widened slightly, an understanding sparking between them in their shared grief. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her pain mirroring his. The canyon sang with an evening chorus of crickets and rustling leaves, serenity colliding with their gritty reality. Clara's breathing grew shallow, and Tom could sense the fading strength in her frame. "I'm not going to let you go," he promised, desperation lacing his words. But the night loomed heavy, and with it came the sounds of the wilderness, the sharp calls of owls and the rustling of something unseen in the brush. A shadow flickered at the edge of the campfire light, unsettling Tom further. "Tom," Clara murmured, her voice dipping into a worried whisper. What if? He clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath his skin. They will, he assured her, though doubt gnawed at him like a caged beast. For every moment Clara lay there, he felt time slipping through his fingers like sand in an hourglass racing to the end. She began to shiver and he quickly unzipped his coat, wrapping it around her shoulders. I know it hurts, he said, resting his hand on her shoulder reassuringly. Just try to focus on something else. Think about your sister. Clara smirked faintly despite the pain etched across her face. An apple pie, she always loved those. Flaky crust, warm with cinnamon, the quiet banter gave them both solace, but the shadows in the canyon grew longer, looming over them like dark omens, threatening to snatch the fleeting moments of connection. Hours ticked past, the sky blanketing them in a deep, swirling darkness. The world outside felt unforgiving, and despite their shared stories, isolation crept in as if the canyon itself were closing around them. Clara's voice broke the stillness, tinged with something new, something heavy. What if? The words hung between them, palpable, frightening. For a moment Tom could barely breathe. No, he said fiercely, gripping her hand tightly. You're going to make it, I won't let you go. But deep down, he knew luck could only stretch so far. The night sprawled like an abyss, and he sensed they were running out of time. A rustling in the brush shattered their fragile calm. Tom's heart slammed against his ribs as the underbrush parted, revealing a figure silhouetted against the faint glow of moonlight. It was another traveler, another soul drawn to the ghost of the wreckage, but Tom's instincts flared. He shot to his feet, ready to defend. He barked, fists tightened and prepared. The figure stepped forward, hands raised in surrender. I'm just a passerby. I saw the lights. Tom's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You're just in time to pick through the bones. No one could see. It's treacherous out here. Look at the path. The stranger stammered, stepping closer, his face now illuminated in the light of the dying fire. He had kind eyes, worn and weary, but the scruff on his chin spoke of a man who had fought more battles than he cared to recount. Please, the stranger continued, desperation edging into his tone. I have rope. Tom hesitated, glancing back at Clara, who looked between them, her brow furrowed with uncertainty. Tom, it's too dangerous. He could be lying, she warned, voice raspy but compelling. Or he could be the only chance we have, he countered, his heart racing with uncertainty. Clara took a deep breath, the weight of the moment hanging over them like a storm cloud. We can't stay here if he's telling the truth. We need to know. Against every instinct, he nodded, taking a leap of faith. All right, he said, swallowing his doubt. We'll trust you, but if you try something. I won't, the stranger promised, and Tom could see the sincerity in his eyes. Together, they formed a plan, racing against time, urgency fueling their every action. With the stranger's guidance, they assembled a crude rescue system. Rope, branches, and sheer will were the ingredients of their fragile hope. As they worked, Tom stole glances at Clara, marveling at her strength even as the chill of fear nestled in his gut. Finally, as dawn broke, staining the canyon in hues of gold and pink, they were ready. Together, they took the risk, shouting to the others still trapped under the wreck. Can you hear us? We're here to help. Tom's heart pounded in rhythm with Clara's fading breaths. The sun rose higher, optimism lingering in the air like warmth, hope wrapped tightly with fear. Slowly, they began to hear the soft murmurs of those trapped, a lifeline to lost souls swirling in the dust of disaster. And one by one, they pulled them free. Rescuers and rescued began to emerge from the chaos, exchanging glances of relief, disbelief, and grief as they recalled the horrors of the accident. But as Tom stood finally, staring at Clara as she smiled weakly, there was a dawning realization seeping in through the cracks of their adrenaline. A connection forged not just in survival, but through shared stories of loss, love, and hope. As the morning sun kissed the earth, promises were made, written not in words, but in the simple act of existence. I'll see you again, Tom whispered, feeling the weight of what they had endured, tethered by their unyielding spirits. Promise me, she replied, her eyes glistening with defiance. I promise, he vowed, feeling the thread of fate tighten between them, sealing their bond against the backdrop of the wild canyon. As the shadows retreated and the world opened up, they stood not just as strangers brought together by calamity, but as two hearts entwined in the drama of life, waiting to explore what came next. beyond the wreckage, beyond the canyon, into the vastness of the unknown. Dust swirled in the canyon like a ghost, biting into the clear air as the sun climbed high. In the distance, a stagecoach barreled forward, its wheels creaking under the weight of passengers and supplies. The shouts of its driver echoed off the rocky walls, mingling with the clatter of hooves. But then a screech pierced through the din, a sudden jolt that shot through the passengers like ice water. The driver had spotted trouble. A rockslide loomed directly ahead, too late to swerve. Time slowed. In that fraction of a second, panic erupted. The horses reared, their eyes wide with fear, hooves pounding the ground in a frantic rhythm. The stagecoach tipped violently, the horrifying sound of splintering wood mingling with screams. Amidst the chaos, the rugged form of the coach toppled over, turning the zenith of the day into a harrowing plunge into darkness. Then silence. Amid the waves of dust, the echoes of panic faded, leaving only the sharp knife of fear lodged in the gut of the canyon. A lone figure rode hard towards the wreckage, Tom Hargrove, a trail guide well-versed in this unforgiving land. His heart raced, not just from the sprint, but from the instinctual knowledge that lives hung in the balance. The terrain was treacherous, but the sounds of distress urged him faster. When he reached the site, his breath caught in his throat. The stagecoach lay crumpled and incomprehensible amidst the rocks and debris, a monument to shattered hopes. As Tom crossed into the debris, a low groan echoed through the wreckage, prompting him to move swiftly, determined to find the source. "Hello!" His voice crackled, but his heart screamed for answers. "Help!" The plea was faint but clear. The sound guided him through the chaos, and with each step, dread loomed larger. He found her, a woman half buried in the twisted metal and broken wood, her vibrant blue dress torn and tattered, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. Panic surged through him. He shouted as he began to pull away the debris with frantic urgency. As he freed her, their eyes met hers, wide with pain but shimmering with an unbroken spirit. In that moment, a connection sparked, stronger than all the destruction surrounding them. He asked, the fear wrapping around every word. "Just a little," she gasped, pressing her hand to her side, her breath coming in shallow waves. "I don't know," he replied, the weight of despair creeping into his voice. Tom carefully lifted her, cradling her gently in his arms. The warmth of her body against him contrasted sharply with the cold touch of dread buried in his chest. As he carried her away from the wreckage, every step felt heavy, fraught with the weight of uncertainty. He asked, needing to keep the silence at bay, needing something more from this encounter. "Clara," she murmured, her eyes fluttering with the effort to stay conscious. "Clara," he echoed, solidifying the name in his memory. "Hold on." But the canyon was a cruel parent, bending heavy shadows over their fragile flame. The air turned cool as night draped over the day, and Clara's breaths became intermittent, each one a reminder of her fading strength. "Stay with me, Clara, please," he implored, scanning their surroundings for any signs of help, any glimmer of hope. Tom settled her on a bed of dry leaves, propping her against the base of a boulder. As he pressed against her wound with a makeshift bandage torn from his own shirt, he felt her draw tighter in on herself, growing distant. Shadows flickered as the sun retreated behind the canyon walls, wrapping them in darkness. "Tell me about yourself," Tom insisted, trying to pull her back, fighting against the creeping dusk. "I was going to see my sister," Clara whispered, her voice barely making it through the trembling of her lips. "She's sick. I thought I could bring her something to cheer her up." He could see the memories flickering in her eyes, vibrant and alive. But as the stars crept out and the night deepened, Tom's mind raced. Every second felt like a thief, robbing them of time. "I'll get you to her, Clara. Just hold on," he urged, desperate to keep the flicker of hope alive. A rustle in the bushes made him tense, instincts sharpening as the sounds of the wilderness surrounded them, the air thick with uncertainty. Tom peered into the darkness, his heart thudding in his chest. Just then a figure emerged, a stranger, thin and weary, carrying a lantern that shimmered like a ghost against the night. Tom barked, stepping in front of Clara protectively. "Easy there," the stranger said, hands raised in surrender. "I'm just passing through. Saw the wreck from up the trail." Tom said, incredulity weaving through his disbelief. "I've done a lot worse than deal with a little injury." The stranger stepped closer, peering at Clara, his eyes softening. We can use this lantern. I know this canyon. Tom hesitated, finally glancing back at Clara, who managed a weak smile, her green eyes a well of vulnerability and ghostly hope. In the deepness of the night, amid the echoes of pain, he saw a flicker of belief she wanted to trust. "All right," he finally relented, a ray of desperation guiding his words. Clarity pushed against uncertainty like dawn breaking the horizon. They moved slowly with great care, the stranger leading them through the rugged terrain as the lantern flickered against the jagged rocks. The chill in the air gnawed at Tom, but he pressed on, Clara leaning heavily against him, finding strength in his presence. "When we get to safety, I'll take you to your sister," Tom whispered. The path wound perilously, a narrow ribbon of hope carved into the rocky cliffside, where each step demanded full concentration. The air grew thick with fear, yet he felt Clara's warmth next to him, a steady heartbeat that grounded him amidst the chaos. She started, pausing to catch her breath. "Neither did I," he replied, a bittersweet camaraderie forming in the stillness between them. Suddenly, a rustle burst forth from the bushes, disrupting the fragile calm. Tom turned sharply, muscles coiled. A shadow darted past, sending a sharp jolt through his spine. He shouted, pulling Clara close as he crouched protectively over her. His instinct screamed danger, but just as quickly as the noise had erupted, it faded into the stillness, leaving only the sounds of night, the chirps of crickets and distant calls of owls. "False alarm," the stranger muttered, his voice loading with tension. As they continued, the canyon walls grew closer, and the lantern flickered ominously, casting long shadows along the harsh terrain. The feeling of being watched prickled Tom's skin, and doubts flared in his mind. Were they alone, or was danger still prowling in the dark? Clara asked, her voice wobbly but unwavering. The stranger hesitated, his breath hitching in the darkness before he spoke. "I've lost people too. I roam these lands, searching for something I can never find. I know how it feels." Tom's heart sank at the truth wrapped in his words. They were all just travelers searching for something, trying to grasp whatever light remained in a world that often felt relentlessly dark. In the depth of night, as the air turned colder and time stretched like a taut string, they pressed on, a fragile bond forging through their shared uncertainties and pain. Tom asked the stranger, wanting to anchor himself in this fragile alliance. "Daniel," he replied, glancing back at Clara. Finally, after what felt like hours of navigating the rugged path, they stumbled upon a clearing. The horizon began to glow softly, the first hints of dawn threading through the darkness, casting silver rays across the land. Tom's heart surged with newfound hope. "There," he exclaimed, urging Clara forward while he kept a vigilant eye on their surroundings. But Clara's breath came in short gasps, her strength fading like the last light of day. I can't go on," she whispered, faltering as her body began to sway. Tom urged, glancing back at Daniel, urgency rising within him. With a last surge of will, he scooped Clara up, cradling her against him despite the strain in his muscles. "Hold on." As they pressed onward, the first rays of sunlight peeked onto the horizon, illuminating the world in brilliant colors. The landscape shifted, revealing a clearer path towards what appeared to be a small settlement nestled beneath the canyon walls, a safe haven glinting in the morning light. But suddenly, Clara went limp in his arms, her head lolling back against him. "No," he whispered, feeling his heart plummet into fear's cavern. Daniel shouted, urgency entwined in his voice. With every ounce of strength left within him, Tom sprinted toward the settlement, urgency driving him forward, fear clutching at his throat. As he burst through the entrance, shouts of surprise met his ears, faces turning as they rushed to assist. "Help!" he cried, pushing through the crowd, Clara still cradled in his arms. They laid her gently on a cot, hands moving swiftly around her, voices dimming into a cacophony of encouragement and care. But Tom stood back, unable to step away from her. His breath hitched as he felt the warmth of her presence melting into the background. "I promise, Clara," he murmured as they worked to revive her. Minutes felt like lifetimes, but finally Clara began to stir, her eyes fluttering open, the wisps of her strength returning like morning light. Relief washed over Tom as he grasped her hand, holding on tight. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, tears brimming in his eyes. Daniel leaned down, a smile breaking through the worry. "You did it," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. But it wasn't just him who had saved her. It was the intertwining threads of their stories, connections forged in the depths of darkness. "Clara," he murmured, leaning closer, her smile fragile yet radiant. Her gaze met his, eyes shimmering with something deeper, a promise, a bond formed not merely in the chaos of a canyon, but in the spirit of survival, in the whispers of hope that danced through the stars above. Lifetimes had been woven together over the course of a single night, from despair to salvation. And when Tom left the settlement later that day, the sun shining full above, he knew their paths wouldn't end here. The bond they had forged among the wreckage would carry them through whatever lay ahead. Each heartbeat resonated within him, a reminder that even in the darkest canyons, light could still find its way through. A woman's scream shattered the stillness of the canyon, piercing through the dust and calm. Just moments before, the stagecoach had raced down the winding trail, a wooden beast trundling through the rugged landscape. Inside, laughter mingled with chatter, 3 passengers swapping stories about distant families, dreams entwined with the promise of tomorrow. All that joy unraveled in an instant. The coach tipped sideways, wooden wheels lifting off the ground as if rebelling against gravity itself. It crashed onto its side, a thunderous cacophony of splintering wood, metal scraping against stone, and the panicked whinnies of horses filled the air. Then silence. As dust settled, the stillness threatened to choke the valley, broken only by the low whimpers of trapped souls. Tom Hargrove, a seasoned guide known for his unyielding spirit and rugged determination, had been camping nearby when he heard the ruckus. Alarm bells rang in his ears, propelling him forward. Fear spurred him to action, a torrent of adrenaline fueling his every step as he raced toward the sound of devastation. When he reached the site, dread curled in his stomach as he surveyed the wreckage. The stagecoach lay crumpled like a discarded toy, horses tangled amidst the debris, their eyes wide with terror. His heart sank. This was more than a simple accident. It was chaos manifested. He called, his voice seemed a feeble attempt to pierce the thick atmosphere of despair. A faint voice, barely audible over the crackling sounds of the broken stagecoach, floated through the wreckage. "Help!" Tom felt a cold surge energizing him. "I'm coming." He pushed past the debris, heart racing. Every moment felt significant, a moment where life hung in the balance. He moved with agility, his hands tearing through splintered wood and twisted metal. Underneath the wreckage, he found her. A young woman, half buried, cradled in broken pieces of the coach. Her vibrant blue dress was now torn and dirty, and blood trickled from a gash on her forehead. She looked fragile, but her eyes burned bright with a flicker of defiance, a spirit fighting against the odds. "Stay still," he shouted, keeping his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Please," she gasped, pain evident in her voice. "Just breathe," he urged, gently freeing her from the wreckage. As he finally lifted her from the debris, their eyes locked, and the world around them faded into insignificance. In that moment, a connection was born amid the shadows and uncertainty. "I'm Tom," he said, urgency lacing his words. "Clara," she replied, wincing as he carried her away from the wreckage. The sun hung low, casting long shadows, and the air was thick with anxiety. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he quickened his pace, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He asked, scanning the surrounding chaos for signs of life, dread clawing at him. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice shaky. Her voice faded, fear washing over her face. He set her down gently on a patch of grass, steadying her before rushing back to the remnants of the stagecoach. He shouted for anyone who might hear, his voice ringing clear in the silence. "If anyone can hear me, respond." The canyon's walls echoed back his cries, but there was no answer. Desperation tightened its grip around him as he searched through the wreckage. He summoned every ounce of strength to look for the others. Time slipped by like grains of sand, and every second felt heavy with dread. Finally, he found them, one of the men unconscious and trapped beneath a beam, while the child remained huddled in shock nearby. With help from the second man, the 3 of them were free. "Over there." The second man shouted, pointing toward Clara, who sat pale and trembling. The relief of their presence was bittersweet. "Stay with her," Tom ordered, rushing back to Clara. "You're safe now," he said, dropping to his knees beside her. Her voice barely broke through. "I couldn't leave you," he said, pressing down on her wound as best as he could, his hands slick with her blood. He turned to the others, urging them to dig out any supplies. They scavenged through the wreck, finding remnants of packs, blankets, and dry rations. As they came together, their urgency grew, each man and woman fighting against the rise of panic. The sun began to dip lower, shadows creeping along the canyon's walls as the reality of their situation set in. "No one knows we're here," Clara murmured, her voice trembling as she looked at Tom. Fear gripped his heart, but he couldn't let it show. "They will," he asserted, though doubts gnawed at him, threatening to unravel the strings of hope he was trying to weave. "We just need to hold on." Hours passed. They took turns tending to Clara and keeping each other's spirits up. Tom and the men managed to rig a makeshift shelter to keep Clara warm, using what they could find. "Tell me about your sister," he prompted, desperate to keep her mind focused. "Mary," Clara replied, a spark igniting in her eyes. "She loves apple pie." As she spoke, Tom could see the colors of her world lighting up her face. He asked, intrigued. "It's in the crust," she said, a small smile breaking through the pain. "And the cinnamon." Tom chuckled, the warmth of her story chasing away some of the shadow that surrounded them. "I've never been much of a baker," he admitted, even as the looming fear gnawed at his insides. But deep down, he knew that these moments mattered, each word a lifeline binding them closer, wrapping warmth against the bitter chill and uncertainty that hung in the air. Just then, a rustle in the bushes shattered their fragile calm, tossing his heart into a wild dance of fear. Tom jumped to his feet, instinct screaming danger. He said, voice low as he scanned the darkness closing around them. "Stay close," one of the men warned, fists clenched, readying himself for whatever might emerge from the shadows. Another hissed, and in the eerie stillness, the world seemed to hold its breath as they waited. Minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching into eternity, the uncertainty wrapping around them like a shroud. Then, silence shattered as a figure emerged, a lone traveler cloaked in the remnants of dusk. Tom's heart raced as he prepared himself to defend Clara. The stranger called, raising his hands in surrender. "I'm just passing through." Tom advanced cautiously, unsure if this was another danger or a potential savior. He demanded, his tone laced with skepticism. "Just a man trying to help. I can guide you out of this canyon," he replied. Tom pressed, suspicion coiling tightly. "I'm not." The stranger's sincerity somehow broke through the tangle of doubt and fear. The second man urged. Holding Clara's gaze, Tom weighed his options. He needed to protect her. "All right," he finally relented. "But if you try anything," the stranger nodded, understanding the magnitude of their situation. Together, they began their descent through the canyon, the stranger leading the way with the flutter of the lantern stretching across the path. With each step, Tom felt the weight of Clara in his arms again, and every ounce of strength poured into her fragile form. "We'll get you to safety," he murmured, holding her gaze steady with unwavering commitment. Darkness enveloped them as they made their way deeper into the canyon, the shadows stretching like dark fingers eager to snatch the last flickers of hope. Laughter of unseen creatures echoed around them, subtle but unnerving sounds that felt like a reminder of their fragile state. Clara's voice quivered, a grim reality creeping into her words. Tom took a deep breath, steel rising within. "We will," he promised, even as doubt gnawed at his insides. "Just hold on to hope." Around them, the landscape shifted, rough and unforgiving, but their spirit fought against the grip of despair. The stranger led them through twists and turns, the path illuminated by the flickering light of the lantern. But the canyon walls loomed higher and the darkness grew thicker like a weight pressing down around them. A crack echoed through the night, rattling through Tom's core. He asked, every instinct on high alert. Relief washed over him as nothing responded, but uncertainty lingered in the air, thick and palpable, a reminder of how delicate their situation truly was. "Focus, Tom," he chanted to himself. They pressed on, seeking the glimmer of dawn on the horizon, advancing one determined step after the other. The flicker of the lantern guided their eyes, the light casting silhouettes against the stone walls. An hour stretched into two, the landscape shifting into an otherworldly scene bathed in dark hues. Tom felt Clara's breathing grow shallow in his arms, each gasp a reminder of the haunting reality that loomed over them. "We're almost there," he tirelessly reassured, though the pangs of fear swelled in his chest as surrender loomed dangerously close. Just as despair threatened to swallow them, they stumbled upon a small clearing. The first hints of dawn permeated through the trees, casting slow silvers and golds across the ground. The stranger exclaimed, pointing to a distant settlement peeking through the trees. Hope unfurled within Tom like a flower. But suddenly, Clara went limp, her head drooping against his shoulder. Panic surged through him, and he could feel every heartbeat pounding through his veins. He gasped, feelings of helplessness crashing over him like a tidal wave. "Keep going," the stranger shouted, but Tom was frozen, terror gripping him. With a surge of determination, he scooped her up again, carrying her towards the distant light. Every muscle in his body strained with the effort, but he pressed on, fueled by love and desperation. As they charged through the brush, the settlement stood proud against the backdrop of sunrise, welcoming them with open arms. He rushed to a group of concerned settlers, their faces a mix of disbelief and urgency. "Help, please," he shouted, laying Clara down gently on the ground. For a moment the world fell away. Time stretched, and a flurry of activity erupted around them. Hands reached out, checking Clara's pulse, assessing her wounds. Emergency fears mingled with relief as they worked, assigning him different tasks in a whirlwind of chaos. Tom whispered, eyes glassy with concern, hope teetering on the edge, waiting to break. An older woman, lined with years of wisdom and a heart that seemed to buffer time, nodded reassuringly. "She's strong. We'll save her," she said, determination settling in her eyes. As the warmth of dawn enveloped him, Tom felt something shift inside. A spark ignited something profound, like he had walked through darkness and emerged into the light. Clara, with her dreams of family and laughter, had drawn him into a connection stronger than the bonds forged by blood. Two souls entangled in a moment, forever marked by chaos but somehow woven into something beautiful. With each beat of hope echoing within him, he knelt beside her, prepared to fight for her future. And as Clara gradually opened her eyes, the sun cradled them, illuminating not just the canyon but the paths yet to come. A sudden jolt, a terrifying scream, and the world rolled into chaos. The stagecoach, a sturdy wooden beast that had once ridden smoothly over countless trails, careened off the narrow canyon path, its wheels lifting clear of the ground. Time seemed to stretch, as if the very air around it held its breath. Inside, passengers clung to their seats, panic painting their faces as the reality of their fate rushed toward them. The crash was thunderous. Wooden beams splintered, and leaden planks crashed against the ground, the screams of terrified horses mingling with the sharp snaps of cracking wood. Dust clouded the canyon, swirling like a storm around the wreckage, swallowing the last echoes of joy that had filled the air moments before. When the dust began to settle, silence hung heavy in the canyon. Overturned and twisted, the coach lay crumpled at the bottom, a monument to misfortune. But was anyone alive? Tom Hargrove, a seasoned guide familiar with this jagged land, was camped nearby. He dropped everything when he heard the commotion. His heart pounded in his chest as he ran toward the wreckage, a mix of fear and adrenaline propelling him forward. The sight before him was shocking. Wooden shards and the panicked whinnies of horses painted a scene of desperation. He called, his voice echoing against the canyon walls. "Help!" The voice was faint but clear, urging him on. Tom's heart raced as he started digging through the debris, wrestling against twisted pieces of wood. He shifted a plank to reveal a figure half buried in the wreckage. Her dark hair tumbled around her face and blood trickled from a gash on her forehead. "Stay still," he shouted, panic rising in him like bile. He gently moved the debris, careful not to jostle her too much. Their eyes met, and in that moment everything around him faded. The world reduced to a single thought: he needed to save her. With a last heave, he pulled her free. "Clara," she gasped, each word a struggle. He could see the fear in her beautiful green eyes, but there was also a flicker of gratitude. "Clara, you're going to be all right. I promise," he said, cradling her in his arms, feeling her weight against him as he moved away from the wreckage. For a brief moment, nothing else mattered beyond her presence. As he laid her on the grass, the reality of their predicament hit him like a sledgehammer. Other passengers might still be trapped, maybe even injured, but Clara's soft moan brought him back to her. He pressed a piece of his shirt against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. She asked weakly, panic creeping into her voice. "I don't know," he replied savagely, the harshness in his voice reflecting the urgency coursing through his veins. "Don't leave," she pleaded, a tremor of fear rattling her words. "I won't go far," he promised, forcing himself to stay calm against the swirling danger. Tom rushed back to the wreckage, heart pounding against his ribs. There had to be someone left. Cried out again, his voice strained, echoing mournfully against the canyon's walls, but only silence ensued. Then he saw them. There, amidst the devastation, a child gazed wide-eyed from behind a fallen beam, while one of the men lay unconscious, trapped beneath the heavy weight of the coach. Adrenaline spurred him into action. "Hey, it's okay," he shouted to the child while moving to free the man. A few moments later, with help from the boy, they managed to lift the beam just enough for the man to wriggle free. The child rushed forward, scooping up the man's limp form, fear filling his eyes as Tom carried the man to safety. He returned to Clara, who looked pale and frail. She asked, panic flickering across her features. "Stay with me, Clara," he pleaded, keeping her one focus. "Help is on the way." The child, trembling and wide-eyed, hovered close. Tom nodded, even as uncertainty gnawed at him. "He'll be fine." Clara's breathing became shallow, and Tom felt a pang in his heart. His hand against her forehead. "I need you to stay with me. Just hold on," he said firmly. She whispered as fear crept back into her voice. "What if—" "Listen," he said, locking eyes with her. "You're not going anywhere. You're stronger than you think, Clara." The stillness encased them, broken now by the child's quiet sobs. They huddled together, shadows enveloping them, night creeping in like a thief stealing away the last remnants of hope. And then, from deep within the canyon, a rustle. Tom tensed, instinctively grabbing a nearby branch, every muscle in his body coiling tight. He ordered, protective instinct roaring within him. A figure emerged from the brush, another man, weary and worn, with a lantern swinging in his hand. He called, hands raised. Tom narrowed his eyes, skepticism flaring within him. "Please," the stranger implored, concern etched on his face. "I can guide you." Clara's eyes shimmered with fear, and Tom felt the weight of the world upon him. "You'll help us." "I just want to help you get out of here," the stranger replied, desperation wrinkling his features beneath the flickering lantern light. "All right," Tom said after weighing his options. "But if you're lying, trust me," the stranger said, resolve lining his voice. With little choice, they moved together through the canyon, the stranger leading the way. Tom kept Clara close, her body trembling against his as he supported her weight. The unknown lingered around them, and uncertainty weighed heavily in the air. "Hang on, Clara. We're going to get through this," he murmured as they navigated the stony path. With each step, the shadows lengthened, but the glow of the lantern offered a fragile thread of hope. Clara leaned against him, her breath warm against his arm. "Tom," she whispered, her voice wavering. He took a deep breath, thoughts racing. "We will," he promised, the conviction in his voice stronger than he felt inside. "Focus on getting to your sister." Her eyes widened a little at the mention. "She's going to be so happy." Seeing the flicker of light return to her eyes, he pressed on, feeding off their shared dream. Shadows flickered around them like ghostly figures, but he pushed them away, focusing only on that small space of connection between them. But then a low growl echoed through the brush, an unsettling reminder of the wild, untamed land surrounding them. Tom froze, heart hitching as dread rushed through every vein. Clara murmured, instinctively clutching his arm tighter. "Just stay behind me," he urged, brows furrowing as he scanned the darkness. The sound grew louder, closer, a rustle that stirred the shadows, and each heartbeat felt like an impending doom. Rising panic clawed at him, but he bit it back, afraid to let it show. They moved forward in a stealthy hush, the stillness teetering on the edge of chaos. The stranger, sensing Tom's discomfort, pressed onward, leading them toward a small clearing where the horizon began to light with dawn's approach. Suddenly, a snap in the underbrush sent a shockwave through their ranks. Tom spun around, fists clenched and ready. But as the shadows shifted, he saw it was just a deer that bounded away into the underbrush, heart racing like his. "It's just a deer," Tom said, chuckling nervously, tension draining slightly. "Just a deer," Clara echoed in disbelief, as if trying to reassure herself. But as they approached the clearing, the sky began to lighten, the first fingers of dawn brushing against the canyon walls, and with it came a sense of possibility. The landscape opened before them, painting a vivid picture of hope and life beyond the darkness. The stranger shouted, excitement budding in his voice as he pointed toward a small settlement ahead. But Clara's weight shifted suddenly. She had gone limp, slipping from Tom's grasp like a fading dream. He gasped, panic surging like fire through his veins. The stranger shouted urgently, even as Tom knelt beside her, disbelief gnawing at him. In that moment, agony pricked at every nerve. He begged, his voice softening into desperation. With trembling hands, he cradled her head, heart pounding too hard against his chest. "You can make it, just hold on." Her eyelids fluttered, a flicker of awareness coming back to her. She whispered, the faintest trace of fear lacing through her words. "Don't close your eyes," he urged, urgency filling every syllable. "We're almost there. You fought through so much." She blinked, trying to focus on him, the shadows lingering around her. What if? The world around him felt vast, threatening to choke him, but he fought against it. "You can. You will. Just imagine your sister, her smiling face, that pie." Tears filled her eyes, but Tom brushed them away, holding her gaze steady. "Trust me, Clara." Rising fear lingered at the edges of his mind, but he pushed it back, closing in on the flickers of hope clustering around them. Finally, he saw the shape of the settlement drawing nearer, brightening with the glow of dawn. Turmoil whirled within him as he lifted Clara onto his shoulder, every step a test as he pushed forth, desperation giving strength to his weary legs. As they burst into the town, shouts of surprise greeted them. Faces of strangers turned as they rushed over, their startled expressions morphing into urgency. "Help!" he cried out, urgency gripping his voice. Hands reached forward, guiding him to a small hut where they laid Clara down gently on a cot. Time slowed as the townsfolk buzzed around, voices overlapping in concern and hurriedness. Tom stood at the fringes, heart hammering in his chest, muscles coiled tight with worry. Every second felt eternal, hope and anxiety mingling dangerously in the air. He whispered, eyes darting between Clara and the medics examining her. "We're going to do everything we can," one woman promised, their gaze earnest. Tom nodded, heart full of unyielding determination, refusing to let despair seep in. As Clara lay there wrapped in blankets, he knelt beside her, the world around them fading into oblivion. "You did it," he whispered, squeezing her hand. Her eyes fluttered open and she smiled weakly. In that moment they shared an unbreakable bond forged from chaos and pain, trapped in a world that felt immeasurable. "You kept me going," she murmured, strength threaded through every word. Tom squeezed her hand tighter, the warmth of her spirit igniting a flicker of hope. "And I always will. You're not alone anymore, Clara." The sun rose higher, illuminating the settlement with renewed vigor, casting shadows of yesterday away as they faced a future woven with compassion and shared dreams. No longer just strangers caught in the grip of disaster, they had forged something beautiful together. As the warmth of dawn wrapped around them, it was a promise of a new day, a reminder that even amidst the darkest moments, love and connection can light the way home. A sudden scream echoed through the canyon, sharp and piercing, shattering the stillness like glass. In an instant, the stagecoach, bound for a better tomorrow, tipped violently, tossing its occupants around like rag dolls. Inside, laughter and chatter turned to panic as the vehicle careened off the narrow cliffside path, wheels spinning in desperate defiance of gravity. The crash was thunderous. A cacophony of splintering wood and the frantic whinnies of horses filled the air, drowning out any remaining echoes of joy. When the dust finally settled, a chilling silence fell over the valley, heavy and oppressive. But within that silence lay a desperate cry for help. Tom Hargrove, a seasoned trail guide, was camping nearby when he heard the commotion. His heart slammed against his ribs as he shot to his feet, fear lacing every thought. He knew this canyon, he had traversed it countless times, but the sight of the wreckage, twisted metal and broken wood strewn across the canyon floor, made his chest tighten in horror. He called, voice hoarse and straining against the residual silence. "Help, please." The voice, faint but desperate, echoed back. Tom sprinted toward the wreck, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He just moved, fueled by a primal instinct to rescue. As he reached the crumpled mass of the stagecoach, the chaos unfolded in front of him. Passengers lay trapped beneath the wreckage, some groaning, others crying out for help. He forced himself to focus, scanning the scene for the source of that haunting cry. "Stay calm," he shouted, digging into the debris, pulling away pieces of shattered wood. Just moments away from the wreckage, he felt hands tugging at him, a small figure wriggling free. "Please." A child's voice, high and quivering, broke through the turmoil. Tom yelled, frustration and urgency entwining in his chest. Inside, he felt his stomach drop. "Stay here." With every ounce of strength, he wrenched at the splintered remains, focusing entirely on the tasks at hand. One final push, and he discovered her, an unconscious woman draped over the remains of the stagecoach. Her auburn hair lay tangled, a stark contrast against the dusty backdrop. Blood trickled from a deep gash on her forehead. "Hey," he cried, shaking her lightly. She didn't respond. Panic surged through him. He checked her pulse. It was weak but there. He shouted, looking back at the child hovering nearby. The boy asked, tears spilling down his cheeks. Tom forced himself to stay calm, though doubt gnawed at him. "She's alive," he reassured the child, "but I need you to get help." The boy nodded and dashed off, fear propelling him forward. Breathless, Tom turned back to the woman. "Stay with me," he urged, pressing his hands against her wound to stem the bleeding. Forcing himself to focus, he gently lifted her, cradling her in his arms. She felt light against him, but the weight of her unconscious form carried something heavy within him, a sense of responsibility, of urgency. Just then, a voice rumbled above the wreckage. Tom looked up to see two men, one a rugged figure with a weathered face and the other younger, frantically scanning the scene. "Help!" Tom shouted, his heart racing. The men rushed down the slope toward him, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Together they began to dig through the remains, revealing bodies trapped beneath the wreckage. One by one they pulled out survivors, calling out names and checking for injuries. The older man, Cole, asked, his voice low and urgent. "Just this woman," Tom said, nodding toward the unconscious figure in his arms. "Let's keep searching," the younger man said, determination filling his voice. They worked quickly, tearing apart the last remaining pieces of the stagecoach, exposing another passenger trapped beneath the heavy wood. Tom urged. With a final heave, they freed the woman, a young mother weeping at the sight of her child, now cradled in Tom's arms. But they couldn't linger. There was still more to do. Finally, they found a way to lay Clara gently on the grass, the flicker of hope wavering in her breath. Tom knelt beside her, running a hand through his hair, anxiety gnawing at him. He asked, his voice shaking, "Please." Her voice was a whisper, fragile yet familiar. "Yeah, I'm right here," he replied, his own voice raw with emotion. "Promise me." Heart pounding, he nodded vigorously, eager to provide her with the comfort she sought. "You're going to be okay." But the canyon was an unforgiving place, where shadows crawled and the air felt thick with uncertainty. As the light began to fade, so did the warmth of Clara's presence. Tom yelled, looking toward where he'd last seen the boy. Minutes felt like hours as they worked against the dying light, huddled around Clara. The two men bandaged her wounds, but their attention was widely divided. Suddenly, they heard footsteps. Tom whipped around to see the boy returning, a townsperson hot on his heels. The townsperson shouted, urgency lit in their voice. The newcomer knelt next to Clara, inspecting her wounds. Tom exclaimed. Without hesitation, the townsperson called for help. Within moments, they managed to lift Clara onto the makeshift stretcher as the others moved to assist the others extracted from the wreckage. Tom's heart sank as they carried Clara further through the canyon, darkness closing in around them. "Stay with me," he whispered as they moved toward the trees lining the canyon's edge. As they emerged from the tree line, a small clearing unfolded before them, bathed in the gentle glow of twilight. A cluster of wooden buildings stood nearby, the town flickering with life as scattered lights blinked on in the encroaching dark. Tom pointed, relief flooding through him. Hands moved quickly, setting Clara down in front of a rustic building that bore the mark of a saloon. The townsfolk rushed forward, ready to care for their own. The townsperson yelled, urgency laced within every word. Tom felt a pang of relief as they whisked Clara away. But as he stepped back, he caught sight of her open, eyes wide and searching. She said again, struggling to sit up, "I'm right here," he said, crouching beside her, attempting to shield her from the chaos. In that brief moment, their connection solidified. The world around him faded into the background as he locked eyes with her, the struggles of the night boiling down to that single essence, a promise forged in darkness. He spent the night at the entrance, listening as the townsfolk murmured and worked, voices rising and falling like a lullaby, a comforting rhythm against the anxiety clawing at his insides. Hours passed, each ticking minute stretching into eternity. But finally, a doctor emerged, face grim. "She's stable," he reported, the air feeling lighter as those heavy words sank into Tom's chest. As if on cue, Clara emerged, bandaged but alive. She stood, albeit shakily, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found Tom's. "Told you I wouldn't leave," he said, a smile breaking through the tension, even as uncertainty hung in the air. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. Tom stepped closer, a warmth spreading through him. "You have a lot of people waiting for you," he said softly, hearts aching to expel all that had transpired, forging a bond that felt indelible. "I want to see my sister," Clara murmured, determination igniting in her eyes. Tom nodded. "We'll make sure you get home safely." As she leaned against him, the fatigue settling over their shoulders like a blanket of shared experiences, Tom realized this journey had changed them both. They had emerged from chaos together, and now the path ahead was one they could share. Days later, with Clara resting and healing, Tom sat at her side, recounting stories of his life, reminiscing about laughter that felt far too distant. Each story wove them closer, the fabric of their lives intertwining in ways neither could have foreseen. "I can't believe we survived," Clara said, a hint of disbelief coloring her words. "Neither can I," Tom replied, a grin softening the lines of worry on his face. And as Clara shared tales about her sister, the life waiting for her beyond those canyon walls, something inside Tom stirred. They had both faced darkness, but together they'd forged light, and it would guide them through whatever lay ahead. A week later, Clara, on the mend, prepared to leave the town. The sun hung bright in the sky, illuminating the world around them. She turned to Tom, her heart filled with gratitude. "I won't forget you," she said softly. "Neither will I," he promised, knowing all too well that their lives were now forever intertwined, marked by that fateful night in the canyon. As the stagecoach rumbled away, Tom watched Clara wave from the window, a spirit glowing brightly in the morning light. With each mile she traveled, he felt their journey ripple out into the world, their connection surviving beyond the crash, a testament to the resilience of hope against the odds. And so, their story carried on, a bond forged amidst wreckage, two souls stitched together by the heartbeats of survival, timeless in its resonance. The canyon's whispers faded, but the light they had discovered together would forever illuminate their paths ahead. A strange crash echoed through the canyon, a mix of splintering wood and panicked screams that shattered the stillness of the afternoon. A stagecoach, once a proud vessel cutting through the rugged landscapes, had met its disaster, a turn too sharp, a wheel too tired, and then chaos. Tom Hargrove, a weathered trail guide with years of experience mapping the wild, had just settled by his campfire when he heard it. The sound gripped his heart. Without a second thought, he bolted into action, sprinting toward the source of the commotion. Moments stretched into eternity as he raced down the rocky path, fear and urgency propelling him forward. The scene that greeted him was one of utter devastation. The stagecoach lay on its side, horses neighing wildly and struggling against the wreckage. Dust clouded the air, swirling like a ghostly shroud around the splintered wood. Tom's breath caught in his throat as he approached, the cries of the injured mingling with the clatter of debris. He shouted, voice echoing through the canyon. He stumbled forward, heart pounding, scanning for survivors in the chaos. "Help!" A voice broke through the turmoil, fragile and desperate. Tom turned toward the sound, urgency surging within him. He fought against the twisted metal and broken wood, pushing aside wreckage with frantic determination. That's when he saw her, a young woman, her auburn hair wild and matted with dirt, blood trickling down from a cut on her forehead. She was half buried beneath a fallen beam, her green eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Stay still," he yelled, heart racing. He could see she was struggling to breathe, the weight of the wreckage pressing down on her. cleared debris quickly. Each piece moved, sending ripples of panic and hope through him. Finally, he pulled her free, cradling her against him as she gasped for air. He asked, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. "Clara," she managed to reply, her voice faint but filled with a flicker of defiance. "I'm Tom. You're going to be all right, Clara," he assured her, even as anxiety gnawed at his stomach. As he carried her away from the wreckage, urgency mixed with the reality of the situation. Clara winced at every movement. Tom swiveled his head back and forth, scanning for any sign of the other passengers. He asked, adrenaline sharpening his senses. She gasped. Knowing he couldn't dwell on the uncertainty, he set Clara down on the grass, finding a semblance of safety beneath an ancient tree. "Just breathe, all right? I'll be right back," he promised, though the knot in his stomach hinted at the gravity of their predicament. Tom dashed back to the wreckage, letting fear fuel his search. Every breath felt like a precious gift amid the wreckage of shattered lives. He called out again, desperation twisting his throat. Then he spotted movement, a small child, frightened and shaking, peeking out from behind a boulder. Relief washed over him like cold water. "Hey there, it's okay," he coaxed gently. As the child shambled toward him, another figure staggered into view, one of the men from the stagecoach, blood dripping from a deep gash on his arm. "Help!" he shouted, voice strained with panic. "Let's get you both out of here," Tom urged, motioning for the child to follow him. He dashed back toward Clara, grabbing the boy's hand. The child whimpered, tears brimming in his eyes. Tom swallowed hard, trying to mask his own fear. "She's nearby." The words felt heavy, a burden he did not fully believe, but he needed the boy to hold on to hope. With the man limping after them, they reached Clara, who looked pale and overwhelmed. Tom said, motioning for them to come closer. He asked the little boy. "Eli," the boy replied, his voice small. "Eli, this is Clara." Tom crouched beside Clara. "We need to stay strong, all right?" Clara nodded weakly, still struggling to catch her breath. Tom fished through the scattered belongings from the coach, searching for anything that could help. He found a cloth, frayed and dirty, but better than nothing. "Here, Clara, I'll press this to your head," he said, careful as he did. But as day shifted to dusk, worry settled into his gut. The canyon walls loomed higher, shadows creeping along the ground, and the air thickened with tension. Despite Tom's reassurances, Clara's breathing grew shallow. "Tom, I don't want to die here," she rasped, fear threading through her voice. "Listen to me," he said, his gaze fierce. "You are not going to die here. We'll get you to safety." The conviction in his words sent a wave of quiet strength through him, but uncertainty still gnawed at his insides. With every minute, darkness settled over them, wrapping the canyon in a cloak of mystery. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush sent a jolt through Tom. He instinctively moved closer to Clara, ready to shield her from whatever terror might emerge. "Stay quiet," he warned, heart pounding as he strained to listen. A shadow darted past and the rustle continued, but nothing showed itself. "Tom, I'm scared," Clara whispered, the vulnerability in her voice making his heart ache. "Me too," he admitted softly, his own fear threading through the words. "But we've got each other." In that moment of raw honesty, something shifted, the bond between them strengthened, an unbreakable tether born from shared fear and hope. Hours turned into what felt like lifetimes. As night loomed, Tom glimpsed a flicker of light in the distance, a beacon of hope amid the darkness. He exclaimed, pointing toward the light. Eli said, his voice shaky but filled with determination. With newfound strength, Tom helped Clara to her feet, supporting her fragile frame. "We're almost there, Clara." Each step felt heavy, a battle against exhaustion and uncertainty, but the flicker of hope propelled them onward. As they drew closer, they could make out figures moving, a group of townsfolk, drawn toward the commotion that had erupted in the canyon. Tom shouted, urgency swelling in his voice. The group rushed forward, eyes wide in disbelief and concern. One of the men called out. There was a crash. Tom barked, his heart racing. They moved quickly, carrying Clara and the others toward the safety of their small town hidden beyond the canyon's edge. With every step, the weight of fear and uncertainty eased just a little, replaced by a flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. Once inside the town, Tom watched as Clara was lifted into the care of the townsfolk. They worked with purpose, quickly assessing injuries and providing comfort where needed. Relief coursed through him as she was whisked away, but he lingered, watching in disbelief at the chaos that surrounded him. He asked one of the medics, desperation gnawing at his insides. "She'll be fine. We just need to stabilize her," the medic replied, their face a mask of focused determination. As hope swelled within him, Tom felt a pang of guilt. He had promised Clara he would keep her safe, and yet she had been hurt. He fought against the creeping darkness of doubt, knowing he needed to stay strong for her. The hours trickled by, each moment stretching into eternity as he waited. Just outside the town hall where Clara had been taken, Tom paced, the anxiety seeping into his bones. Finally, the door swung open, and Clara emerged bandaged but alive, a spark of determination glowing in her eyes. Relief washed over him like a cool breeze on a hot day. She called, slowly approaching, her voice stronger than he expected. I thought I lost you," he breathed, emotion surging within him. He stepped forward, pulling her into a gentle embrace, the warmth of her presence flooding through him. "I'm still here," she whispered against him, and he could feel her smile through the tension of the last several hours. As she settled back into a chair, exhaustion overtook her, but the light in her eyes remained. "You saved me," she said softly. "I didn't do it alone," he replied, a warmth settling in his chest. In that sacred moment of connection, the weight of what they had experienced melted into something profound. They had faced chaos together and emerged united, bonded by a shared struggle greater than themselves. Days turned into weeks, and Clara slowly recovered. Each visit with her brought lightness to Tom's heart, for they had survived the darkness as a team. They shared laughter and stories, diving deep into each other's lives as they grew closer, the echoes of their shared ordeal weaving a stronger connection. "I never thought I'd find a friend in such a terrible situation," Clara said one afternoon, her voice light with laughter. Tom chuckled, the sound rich and genuine. "Sometimes it takes a crisis to see the true colors of people. You're a fighter, Clara." As they exchanged stories, a bond built, one forged from the fires of chaos into something beautiful. Clara shared secrets of her life, little joys and dreams she had for her future, while Tom enveloped her with tales of his adventures through the wild trails, the weary beauty of the world that lay beyond the town's borders. Weeks later, as Clara prepared to return home to her sister, the morning sun shone down brightly on them, illuminating their paths ahead. "I can't believe I'm actually going back," she said, excitement sparking in her voice. Tom felt a bittersweet pang in his chest. "Absolutely. A cinnamon apple pie just like our mother used to make," she promised, laughter dancing through her words. "Deal," Tom replied, warmth spreading through him. They lingered in the moment, savoring the connection that had turned strangers into friends, forged by fire and shaped by the unexpected. When it came time for Clara to leave, Tom stood by the stagecoach with her. The sun hung low, casting golden rays across the dusty ground. He felt a pang of sorrow and pride as they exchanged shy glances, warmth between them palpable. "Thank you for everything," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll always be here if you need me," Tom replied, his heart swelling. The realization that their lives had intertwined felt monumental, a mark of resilience amid chaos. As the stagecoach rumbled away, Clara waved from the window, her smile radiant and filled with promise. Tom watched, the dust settling in the distance, knowing this was not the end but a new beginning. In that moment, two souls connected through trial and triumph turned the dark echoes of their experience into a light that would guide their pathways, for they had found something precious: hope, friendship, and the power to carry on. The canyon had held them captive in chaos, but it had also freed them to discover the profound strength of shared humanity. The stagecoach careened down the canyon trail, its wooden wheels rumbling against the rocks like thunder. Laughter and stories filled the air inside as the passengers relished the thrill of the journey, the promise of fresh beginnings shimmering in the distance. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the lush canyon and painting it in vivid colors. But within moments, that joy turned to chaos. A sharp turn approached, and the driver's shout echoed through the air, warning of the impending danger. In an instant, the stagecoach tilted, the weight of it straining against the wild tilt of the earth. It tumbled over the edge, hitting the rocky ground with a bone-jarring crash, splintering apart like a fragile dream shattered into a million pieces. Silence followed the cacophony, thick and heavy. Dust swirled around the wreckage, mingling with the cries of panicked horses. Somewhere within that mountain of destruction, a voice called out a desperate plea for help. Tom Hargrove, a seasoned trail guide, was camped nearby. He had just settled down for a much-deserved rest when the noise pierced through the tranquility of the canyon. Adrenaline flooded his veins, propelling him into action. Fear clawed at him, but it was overshadowed by a deeper instinct. There were lives in danger. He raced toward the sound, quickening his pace as he approached the crash site, his heart pounding in tandem with the thundering hooves of the horses in distress. As he reached the wreckage, the scene was beyond anything he could have imagined. The stagecoach lay on its side, a twisted mass of wood and metal. Panic gripped him as he pushed through the debris, searching fervently for survivors. He shouted, his voice echoing off the canyon walls, though it felt like an empty cry in the night. "Help!" The voice rang out again, weaker this time but still urgent. Tom's heart raced as he followed the sound to its source. There, beneath the remnants of the coach, he saw her, a young woman with auburn hair, her face pale and smeared with dust. Blood trickled down her temple and she struggled to breathe, her eyes wide with fear. He commanded, his voice steady as he knelt by her side. With shaky hands, he hoisted away the debris cluttering her body. Each piece he removed felt significant, carrying the weight of her survival. Finally, he pulled her free, cradling her in his arms. He asked, searching her face for any sign of consciousness. "Why, yes," she gasped, her voice faint but filled with determination. "What? You're safe now," he reassured her, shocked at how fragile she felt in his arms. His instincts kicked in as he assessed her injuries. "We need to move, there might be others trapped." I think so," she whispered, though he could see the pain etched in her features as she shifted. Tom helped her stand, her arm draped over his shoulder for support. The moment they stood together, he felt a flicker of hope amidst the despair, something solid anchoring them in this chaotic moment. She asked, looking around the wreckage, concern flashing across her face. "Don't worry about them yet. I'll find them. Just hold on to me," he said, his voice steadying as they began to make their way through the twisting debris. As they moved, the world felt perilous around them. The canyon walls loomed like sentinels, and the dust thickened the air, almost suffocating. But Tom pushed forward, fueled by the urgency to find additional survivors. Suddenly, a child's voice echoed through the wreckage, filled with desperation. "Mom!" Tom winced at the sound, his heart sinking at the thought of a child lost among the chaos. They turned back toward the wreckage, where a small figure stood, trembling and wide-eyed. The woman called out, her voice breaking slightly. The boy rushed toward her, not caring about the debris between them. The moment was electric, full of raw emotion as he reached her side, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm here," she exclaimed, pulling him into her arms, relief flooding over her features. Tom felt the weight of their bond, a reminder of what lay at the heart of this tragedy. "We need to get out of here," he said, glancing back at the wreckage, thinking of how they would get past the chaos to safety. With Eli clinging to her, Clara steadied herself. "I can walk, but I'm not sure how far I can go. I feel so dizzy," she admitted. "That's okay. Just take it slow," Tom reassured her, strength flooding through him as he helped support her weight. They began to move as a unit, a small family in the aftermath of disaster, but the path to safety was littered with obstacles. Each step felt arduous, uncertainty clawing at Tom. He knew time was against them. "Tell me about your sister," he urged Clara, hoping to distract her amid the tension. "She's lively," Clara said, a hint of a smile breaking through. "Always singing. She has a way of brightening a room. I was bringing her a gift, a pie." Tom chuckled softly, the image of a happy sister bringing a smile to his heart. "I can almost see her face," Clara said, determination seeping back into her voice. Just then, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble, a low rumble echoed through the canyon, and fear seized him. He shouted, urgency flooding his veins as they pressed on, heartbeats thundering like rushing horses. But as night began to fall, the shadows around them lengthened like dark fingers, stretching closer. The chill in the air felt like a harbinger of a looming dread that settled over them all. Clara's voice was shaky, fear threading through her words. "Don't think like that," he said firmly, locking eyes with her. We are going to make it." The world felt wide and daunting, but he held her gaze with unwavering determination. "You're not alone," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Not now." With every step forward, Tom felt their bond growing stronger, a connection born from fear, determination, and an insatiable will to survive. The darkness loomed ahead, yet their shared laughter and memories of family pulled them through the thick fog. Suddenly, a sharp noise broke the stillness, a crashing sound as if the earth itself were angry. Tom's instincts kicked in and he spun around, ready to defend. But before he could react, a figure emerged from the brush, a man disheveled and weary with wild eyes seeking clarity. Tom demanded, standing protectively in front of Clara and the boy. The stranger called, "I saw the wreckage from up the hill." Tom narrowed his eyes, assessing the man. "Help, I swear I'm just trying to help." The man's urgency reflected the gravity of their situation. Tom glanced at Clara, uncertainty written on her face. He asked, weighing their options. "I don't know," Clara whispered, fear creeping back into her voice. Though wary, Tom understood that they needed a plan. "Fine, we'll trust you, but if you try anything, just follow me," the stranger urged, his eyes wide with sincerity. With little choice left, Tom nodded. They cautiously moved forward, a small group navigating through the darkness together, their breaths mingling with the chill of the night. The stranger led the way, lantern flickering through the underbrush as Tom and the others stumbled behind, every rustle of leaves sending ripples of anxiety down their spines. "Stay close," Clara murmured, leaning against Tom for comfort. For all his bravado, he felt the fear coiling within him, but he had to remain steadfast. He couldn't falter now. As they swept through the canyon, the shadows of the trees loomed larger, and the air thickened with uncertainty. Tom found himself stealing glances at the stranger, searching for any sign of deceit. Minutes felt like hours, the landscape looming larger, until finally they reached a small clearing bathed in the faint glow of the lantern. Tom's heart sank. "Is this?" the stranger exclaimed, pointing to a faint glow on the horizon. "There's a settlement just beyond." The adrenaline surged, intertwining with the fear clinging to him. They pushed on, Tom leading Clara while keeping a watchful eye on the stranger. Then out of nowhere, the ground trembled. He yelled, urgency spilling forth. As they scrambled, Tom's world narrowed down to the sound of heartbeats and hurried breaths. Clara gasped beside him, her grip tightening on his arm as they rushed toward the light. And from the darkness, a rumble echoed, this time profound and fierce. The canyon seemed to roar, angry and alive beneath them as obstacles fell from the wall. Tom shouted, coaxing Clara forward. The fear sparked within him, igniting a fire in his heart. He would not let her down. They raced into the clearing, the warmth of the settlement's glow spilling out to meet them. The invisible barrier between chaos and safety felt tangible as they reached the first building, where startled townsfolk rushed forward, their faces stricken with surprise. "Help!" Tom yelled, desperation flowing from him. "Who are you?" one man shouted, concern etched deep in his features. There was a crash, Tom said, frustration spilling from him. The townsfolk moved swiftly, showing them into the sturdy building. Clara was taken into the care of a group of medics, and Tom felt the knot in his stomach begin to loosen, though uncertainty still shadowed him. Hours passed as Tom waited, anxiety twisting and turning within him. Each minute felt like a lifetime. The fear of losing Clara loomed in the back of his mind, but he couldn't let despair engulf him. Finally, the door swung open, and amidst a flurry of activity, Clara appeared, bands and dressings wrapped around her arms and head, yet she emerged with a spirit undaunted. She called, her voice brightening at the sight of him. He rushed to her side, relief flooding through him. "You scared me," he said, pulling her into a warm embrace. "I'm here. I'm still here," she reassured him, her eyes shining brighter now. As they stood together, the weight of their shared ordeal faded into the background. The warmth of the moment enveloped them, and the chaos they had survived dissipated like mist in the morning sun. "Thank you for saving me," she said softly, sincerity flowing through her words. "I wouldn't have let you go," he replied earnestly. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's recovery transformed their friendship into a bond deeper than either had expected. They shared laughter and memories, discovering more about each other than they had imagined through the horror of the crash. "I can't believe I ever doubted I'd make it," Clara remarked one afternoon, her voice filled with a newfound strength. "Neither can I," Tom admitted, a smile creeping across his face. Suddenly, a familiar glint of the sunlight broke through the horizon, and Clara's eyes sparkled with hope. She said, bubbling over with excitement. Tom felt a bittersweet pang in his heart as he helped her prepare for the journey. "Just promise me you'll make that pie when you get back," he teased, happy at the thought of her brightening someone else's life. "Absolutely. Cinnamon apple," she chimed, laughter ringing in the air like a sweet melody. With a special farewell, the day arrived for Clara's departure. Tom stood at the edge of the settlement, a bittersweet mix of emotion filling the space between them. The sun stretched high, casting a warm glow around them. Clara asked tentatively, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Always," Tom promised, his heart swelling at the connection they had forged. As Clara boarded the stagecoach, Tom felt a mix of pride and sorrow. She turned and waved from the window, her smile radiant against the harsh realities they had faced together. And as the coach rattled away, he couldn't shake the feeling of their journey together, how a tragedy had woven lives together, forging a bond that transcended the wreckage. Weeks later, the canyon whispered stories of resilience. Tom continued his work, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. The echoes of that day lingered in his mind, a reminder that even in darkness, there was light. The stagecoach may have crashed, but out of that chaos, something beautiful had emerged, a friendship built on shared struggles and hope, reminding him that love and compassion could guide even the heaviest of hearts. In a world tempered by trials and tribulations, he had found not only someone to save, but someone who saved him in return, a timeless connection forged in the most unexpected of places. A terrifying scream shattered the tranquility of the canyon, cutting through the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves. The stagecoach, a sturdy vessel of wood and iron, had just taken a sharp turn along the precarious cliffside. Inside, laughter transformed into panic as the driver fought to regain control. But gravity had its own designs. With a bone-rattling crash, the stagecoach tipped over the edge, a cascade of dust and splinters flying into the air like a haunting specter. Time seemed to stop as everything went quiet, save for the groans of horses and the sharp breaths of terrified passengers. Tom Hargrove stood not far from the scene, his heart pounding in his chest. He was a trail guide, accustomed to the rough terrain and the untamed beauty of these parts, but he had never witnessed anything like this. He dropped his gear and sprinted toward the wreckage, adrenaline propelling him forward. His voice echoed in the canyon, desperation lacing each syllable. "Help, please!" A voice cried out amidst the wreckage, sending chills down his spine. Tom pushed through the chaos, debris strewn around like an exploded dream. The air was thick with dust, and panic clawed at his throat. The smells of leather and burnt wood filled his nostrils as he frantically searched for signs of life. And then he saw her, a woman trapped under a beam, blood trickling down her face, her green eyes wide with fear. "Stay still," he shouted, heart racing as he knelt beside her. With urgency and determination, he cleared away the wreckage, each piece torn from the chaos of the crash. She whimpered, struggling to keep her eyes open. "Hang in there," he asked, his hands trembling as he assessed her wounds. "Clara," she gasped, the name barely a whisper. "All right, Clara, I'm Tom. We're going to get you out of here," he said, lifting the beam with every ounce of strength he had. He felt her weight against him as he finally pulled her free. She felt lighter than he expected, but her presence weighed heavily on him. An unspoken bond formed in those frantic moments. As he lifted her carefully, Tom scanned the wreckage, the wrecked stagecoach, revealing more horrors. He asked, fearing the answer. I don't know," Clara stammered, pain evident in her eyes. "Stay with me," he said, urgency spurring him on as he cradled her against him and moved away from the destruction. He needed to find the others, and quickly. Time felt precious. Clara suddenly cried out, her voice strained. He turned back to her, a wave of concern crashing over him. "I can't." Her voice trembled and panic seeped into his chest. "Just hang on, you're gonna be all right," he promised, struggling to keep his own fear at bay. As he moved further from the wreckage, he glanced back at the chaos. The once lively stagecoach was now a crippled beast, twisted and broken, just like the trail they were on. But there was no time to dwell on the wreckage. Tom felt a surge of anger and a relentless need to find the others. His thoughts raced as he searched the nearby area, scanning desperately for any signs of life. He called, hoping for a miracle. Moments passed like hours, and just when he thought despair would swallow him whole, he heard a child's voice. "Mama!" Tom's heart twisted as he rushed toward the sound, adrenaline pushing him forward. He spotted a small figure, a boy standing by a boulder, eyes wide with fright. "It's okay," he shouted, crouching down to the boy's level. The child whimpered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Just hold on, kid. We're going to find her," Tom assured, feeling a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. The boy nodded, shivering in fear. "Follow me," Tom asked, his instincts kicking in as he scanned around for clues. I think so," the boy replied, glancing back nervously. Tom took a deep breath and led the boy back to Clara, who was now sitting against a tree, visibly shaken but pushing through the pain. "This is Eli," Tom said, motioning to the boy. Eli cried out, looking toward the scattered remnants of the stagecoach. "SHH, we need to find her quietly," Tom urged, trying to gather their strength. Tom turned back toward the wreckage. A sense of dread washed over him as he dug through the chaos, heart pounding with every movement. He checked each person he found, battling against the settling darkness that threatened to overwhelm them. Then the sound of whinnying horses drew his attention. He approached a nearby patch of wreckage and spotted a woman trapped beneath a beam. Her face looked pale and she was struggling to breathe. Tom shouted, rushing to her side. She gasped, eyes wide with fear. He gritted his teeth and forced the beam aside with all his might. "I've got you." With one final shove, he freed her from the wreckage. She collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, but he was more concerned about the ominous silence from the surrounding area. "Stay with me." She nodded slightly, still trying to catch her breath. As Tom turned back to the wreckage, unease slithered through him. There was still the child's mother to find. He pushed through the chaos, fear mingling with desperation. Tom asked the woman he had freed. She nodded slowly, attempting to rise but faltering. "No," he shouted, rushing to support her. "Let's find the last person, Tom. We have to hurry," Clara urged, determination lacing her voice despite her pain. With every ounce of strength, Tom scanned the wreckage, hoping against hope they would find the child's mother. The night closed in, shadows lengthening around them like icy fingers. Suddenly, a rustling sound whipped through the brush, a reminder that they were not alone in this desolate place. Tom turned sharply, every instinct on high alert. He ordered, heart racing as he prepared for whatever might emerge from the shadows. But it was just a fox, darting across the trail in search of food. Relief washed over him, but the weight of worry quickly returned as their situation remained dire. They had to find more survivors, but time was slipping away and he could feel it. Clara said slowly, her voice trembling. "Just a bit longer," he replied, forcing his legs to push forward despite exhaustion creeping in. Then he heard it, a faint sound, almost a whisper. "Help me." The voice reverberated through the thick air, guiding him toward a small gap in the debris. Fear and hope wrestled inside him as he squeezed through the fallen beams. Finally, he emerged into a small alcove, and there she was, the child's mother, crumpled against the rocks, gasping for air. "Please, help me," she gasped, eyes filled with panic. "Hold on," Tom exclaimed, rushing forward. But as he knelt beside her, a gut-wrenching realization struck him. She was trapped beneath an enormous log. Clara called from behind him, voice tinged with urgency. "I need strength." The two women looked on as he gathered all his energy and focused on shifting the log. He could feel the sweat beading on his forehead, muscles screaming in protest. They were running out of time. The night air was growing colder and uncertainty clawed at his heart. With a final grunt, he managed to lift the log just enough for the woman to wriggle free. She gasped in relief, but before he could catch his breath, Clara's voice broke through the chaos. "Tom, we need to go," she shouted, pointing to the rocky wall behind them where dark clouds began to swirl ominously. Panic surged through him. Clara insisted, tension snapping like a taut string. Tom weighed the options, and in that moment he realized that they were all tightly woven together. "All right, let's get everyone out," he said, urgency rising within him. With the two women at either side, they hurried back to the ridge, the echoes of danger following them as they traversed the unsettled rubble. As they reached the canyon's edge, Tom and the women turned to look back. It was a mistake. The earth trembled violently beneath them, rocks tumbling and dust clouding the air in a wild frenzy. He yelled, pushing them forward. They charged toward safety as the canyon roared its disapproval, debris crashing down behind them. Tom could feel the rush of destruction at his heels, an ominous reminder of how fragile life was. Then, a massive rock fell, blocking their only exit, and they were trapped. "No!" Clara cried out, fear leaking into her voice as the ground continued to shake beneath them. Tom felt a surge of panic rising, but he couldn't allow it to manifest. He shouted as they pressed into a narrow passage just before the rockfall, tremors echoing around them. The child's mother whispered, her voice quaking. "No," Tom said, his resolve firm. "We'll find a way out." As they huddled together in the darkness, the reality of their situation sunk in deeper. The air grew heavy, and Tom felt the weight of despair threatening to crush them. Suddenly, a hot wind surged through the passage as the ground shook violently. He shouted, heart racing. Then the sound of cracking stone filled the air, a horrifying symphony of nature's fury. Clara whined, panic edging her voice. "Just breathe," he urged, letting strength flow from him as he kept the others at his side. But just then, something shifted, and the cavern began to collapse, rocks tumbling toward them in a deadly cascade. Tom's mind raced, eyes darting around. He could see only darkness closing in. They were trapped, each second feeling like the last thread of hope slipping away. But as the ground crumbled beneath them, they fell into the darkness, swallowed whole by the earth, their fate hanging by a fragile thread in the unforgiving grip of the canyon.